Hello, everyone. It's Irv, and about a couple of weeks ago, I did a post on my first 4 hours of combat in Operation Desert Storm, and this one is about my first 4 hours on my first expedition of being on the multinational force in Beirut, Lebanon, if you want to call it that, but that's what I did. So back, I was 20 years old. I was with the 24th Marine Amphibious Unit. We had headed up towards Denmark. We did an exercise there, Operation Northern Whiting and Bold Guard West. So we did like all over Denmark. We had trained, and then we headed back through West Germany on the way out. And at that point, things started going bad in the Eastern Mediterranean, to where the government was interested in coming up with some type of solution. And what had happened was that the president of Lebanon was assassinated. And Beirut was in a mess. The Israelis had went in, the Syrians were in Lebanon. You had the Druze, the Shiites, everybody all fighting each other. So what ended up happening was that the 32nd Marine Amphibious Unit went in first, and they established positions. Once that was done, they pulled up and they left. And what ended up happening from there is that the Israeli Defense Force had a really, really big fight against the PLO. And they cornered the PLO into a corner of Beirut. And I guess the Reagan administration decided, instead of letting them annihilate the annihilate the Palestine Liberation Organization, perhaps going in and extracting them and sending them to Cyprus was the answer. So Larnaca ended up being the place. 32nd came back. They got there before we did. And they started the process of getting the PLO out. They didn't act like they were humble. They were freaking wild. And I mean, to see the PLO, the bandanas, you could tell that they had been in combat for a while, just by how they looked. They weren't friendly to us. They weren't grateful. I remember one PLO soldier taking out this big ass knife, looking at me and doing that. And of course, I didn't do anything. We had just landed, so we had a team of about 12 Marines, 6 vehicles, 12 Marines. We landed via causeways. So we came in on an LST. The USS Lemoore County was our ship. And so once the causeways were married up, the first stick went out. I had a team. I remember Lance Corporal Romero. I don't remember much of anybody else other than myself that was on it. So we pull on the side of the road over by Sidon Road, and we're looking south, like we're, headed towards Israel or something. And we're sitting there. Lance Corporal Romero was in the point vehicle, and he's sitting on the front of his truck, just kind of watching things. There's no real threats, We had on our gear, helmets and flak jackets and things like that. What ended up happening was that a car bomb went off down by Romero. This car bomb was so intense, it knocked him completely off the vehicle. He hit his head on the ground. That wasn't what everybody was focused on at the time. I remember all I saw from that vehicle that was left was just like the transmission. It was just sitting there on the ground, and everything else around it was gone. As people are running towards that car bomb, a second car bomb detonated. And when we landed, I guess it was big news, because there was press, there was everybody was there. So as people started running towards the car bomb, the second car bomb detonated, and that's when there was casualties. It turned really, really bad, really, like instantly. There was body parts everywhere. I had one Marine that had been knocked off a vehicle, had a concussion, and they suspended amphibious operations, and here I am, brand new corporal. I got promoted months before that, and now I'm having to put everything I learned to the test. So we got Romero taken care of, and then they suspended the amphibious operations, and so we had to end up trying to figure out where we had to go. They had, fortunately for us, the ground combat element had already taken over positions along Perimeter Road, and so we were able to get navigated through because we didn't have maps, we didn't have anything to get to where we're supposed to go, and we couldn't stay on the beachhead, of course. So we headed inland. We found where we were supposed to be. The MSSG element is supposed to be, and so we circled the wagons, the vehicles, and we set up the security. I stayed up all night. There was no way I was sleeping through that. You had to see Beirut. The day before we landed, we set off the coast and just watched what was happening in Beirut. And there was a lot going on. There was a lot of sects that were fighting. None of them seemed to like the Israelis, so the Israelis were the ones that were the receivers. But they were doing things. The way they fought, it was different. And so you could see them just blowing things up. They had no regard for how built up Beirut was. They were just taking names, and civilians were a byproduct, just like they are today. It's no change. I just couldn't understand why the United States would not tell the American people the truth about what had happened in Beirut. That we were being attacked. We were being attacked by the Israeli Defense Force. They felt that we did not properly evacuate the Palestine Liberation Organization out, and so they felt that there were still elements, and so that made us their enemy too, and they treated us like that. So they started with the rocket attacks, the direct and indirect fire that would just come out of nowhere. They would breach our positions with armored columns, looking for the PLO, completely attempting to disrespect the Marines. The Lebanese that were our counterparts were a very weak force, not capable of defending themselves. I don't think they ever defended themselves in their whole history. It's another story. And so they would drop their weapons and just run at the sight of a Israeli convoy. And so my first 4 hours in Beirut were interesting. I'm gonna have to get Lance Corporal Romero, we're friends, to talk about things from his perspective. But yeah, we saw some stuff in Beirut. Convoys that we went on were extremely dangerous. We were in what's called the Christian sector of Beirut, and we had to go through the Muslim sector where we weren't welcome to get to the embassy. We had daily convoys, two convoys a day that we would have to take to the embassy, picking up mail, picking up all the stuff for the Marine Amphibious Unit. There was times where we would get shot at on convoys. Vehicles would block us. We got in a little bit of trouble over it, but I don't know if the commanders really knew what we were dealing with on these convoys. And we'd have to basically at intersections just kind of bust our way through because it was really dangerous. And so they started making us put numbers on our trucks so they could determine who were the drivers that were doing all this damage. But make a long story short, we just tried to get through Beirut the best way we can. Now, there's a lot of the Marines that I served with that went back to Beirut for a second tour, and I'd love to be able to get some of those Marines on to talk about their experiences on October 24th, 1983. Talk to you soon. Bye.